This channel is supported by TrueFire. TrueFire is an online library of lessons from some of my favourite players. There's thousands of lessons on there. You can use the promo code JNC40 to get 40% off of any of their courses. I'm a guitarist who I think is as much in need of inspiration as any other guitarist who's out there. So I create at the moment sort of 2 videos each day, and so each day I come to the guitar and come to the camera or whatever fresh and try and find something that is either interesting enough to me that I want to make a video on it, and hopefully therefore ends up being slightly interesting for 1 or 2 other people. What was really cool to me, and it's been a big help over the last few months, TrueFire asked if I'd be interested in kind of having them on board as a sponsor, and this has kind of become quite an important part of what I do on the channel. I don't know if this partnership is going to continue for much longer, but while it's still ongoing, I just wanted to talk about how I've been finding it useful and how I've been using it, and then also expand that into something that we could talk about where I can pick up a guitar and show you some stuff. So I occasionally, you know, of an evening might be thinking, okay, well, what am I interested in right now? So I've found things on there like Tommy Emmanuel, and that's got me interested in this idea of fingerstyle stuff. So I was practicing that for a good period of time, and that's going to be ongoing. There was some really good stuff from Martin Taylor about how he builds up his chord melody stuff. I even watched some Steve Vai to kind of get a sense for how he thinks about the guitar. There's some Robbie Calvo stuff that I found interesting on looping. There's Tim Miller had that amazing kind of creative arpeggio design course. Andy Timmons has a bunch of courses on there, and I found some real inspiration there as well. What I found today was Alan Hinds, and I was thinking, right, what could I do and talk about? And so I just started to look at Alan Hinds' course and watch it and kind of take it in, and I instantly found just 2 simple things that popped out to me that could easily inspire me for a practice session. And so I think that's, for me, the beauty of the TrueFire thing is there's this thing on there called an all-access pass, which I think is $99 at the moment for the year. And if you use the link below, then that lets them know that you got there through this. But what I was thinking was, like, you know, it's not terribly expensive versus something like Netflix or Spotify. And I think could be one of those things that brings you regular inspiration. It's worked for me, and I've found some really interesting stuff on there, and it's from people that I think deserve our attention in terms of talking about the things that have ended up making them the musicians they are. So Alan Hinds was talking about two things specifically on his course, Melodic Improv, and obviously melodic improvising is something I'm interested in. But what I was really interested in was that he seems to be talking about these two things which I think there's a natural tension. You know, like a lot of people kind of think you can play with feel and instinct, and other people think theory, and there seems to be like an inherent tension between the two. The best players are players that don't know theory, or some people think that you have to know theory to be relevant. I think most mature people probably think that mixing up the two is where you get this really exciting kind of fusion of not just feel and instinct, but also mixing in ideas that might be kind of fresh or surprising. You know, players like Eric Johnson, Alan Hinds, Robin Ford, Sean Lane, you know, Guthrie Govan, people that can really mix up both worlds. And I think what it was interesting to me was that he was talking about not only kind of, you know, you can learn scales from a book and all this sort of stuff, but he was talking about like practically exploring things that exercise this kind of idea of feel on the guitar and that sort of stuff. So I found that really interesting, really inspiring. And two more ideas that I'm just going to show you that was something that someone asked for this backing track earlier on, and it kind of happened that this made sense to talk about in this context as well. So yeah, the all access pass, $99 for the year. If you were interested in that, if you use the link below, then I think TrueFire will then know that you arrived through this page, and hopefully that will help our partnership to be ongoing, because it does really help me with, you know, costs of living, etc. It's the sort of company that I sort of do have a lot of respect for what they're doing, particularly because they've got some of my favourite players on there. There's also a code JNC40 where you can get 40% if you're buying any individual courses, but for me, I think the value that I get out of it is through having that ability to go in there and look at any course. That's what the all access thing is about. So immediately two things jumped out at me that he was talking about, and one of them was about getting more out of what you already know. Well, both of them were really, but in this context, so I imagine that you may already know this is the kind of D flat major that you may have heard a lot of. 4th fret, we've got the root. 6th fret, we've got the 5th. We've got our major 7 on the 5th fret, and then we got the 3rd on the 6th fret on the B string. Now, that in and of itself is not necessarily the most sexy chord. What Alan was talking about was, why don't you just try doing this kind of thing where you pluck 2 strings at a time and he kind of called that a partial, and I thought, yeah, that's exactly the sort of thing that I think instantly can transform the sound of what might appear boring or maybe slightly ordinary, and you know, with just kind of 2 chord shapes there, you can have a ton of fun. So those are the 2 shapes, the major 7, and then I was also doing major 7 and 9. So for this is a B flat chord essentially. We've got a D here, a B flat on the 8th fret. We've got a C, which is the 9 on the 5th fret. then we've got an F on the 6th fret, and then the top we've got an A. And you go between these two, and this is what I'm going to come to in a second. And you can have loads of fun. Now, the other really cool thing that he was talking about was this idea of practicing playing over changes. And one of the things that he was kind of talking about was that when you're playing over jazz stuff, some of what can happen is that the changes go by too fast, and then sometimes if you slow it down too much, it gets boring. What he was also talking about was that instead of doing that kind of thing, just taking a 2-chord vamp and doing this sort of thing where you're moving between 2 chords a minor third away. So in this case, what I was doing was going between this D flat major and a B flat major. Same chord, just an inversion. And then, so what he was talking about was, so if I'm thinking in my head, so those are both kind of chord 4s, or it's like a Lydian sound. Now, you don't need to think about it in this way. What you could think about is that you're moving from kind of chord 4 of F, so F major, and then chord 4 of A flat major. So we've got this movement here, so major to major. We've got this minor third thing, which is kind of the sound of the blues in a lot of ways. In this context, it doesn't sound very bluesy, but I think that's a really cool interval to try using, and it's kind of, you could think of it in some ways as kind of parallel modal thinking or something like that, or borrowing from the parallel modes. In my head, I'm just thinking about 2 chords that belong to different modes, but are the same in each kind of key. So when I'm then playing over that, which I was doing in the introduction, what I'm thinking about is the switch from F major to A flat major, and trying to be successful in landing ideas across both keys and traversing that. I think that's one of these really cool things where you can meld this idea of theory. So we've taken this idea from theory because we're shifting things by a minor third, and then we're going to try and build our instinct by just kind of improvising over this idea, playing from F major to A flat major, because we put them in a context and said these are the same chords, we're just moving them a minor third, therefore we can treat them kind of the same. So you get this kind of idea if I just kind of loop something. And instead of going bonkers with this, the kind of idea that I'd like to have is just try and keep within a similar place on the fretboard and try and be melodic. And I'm just thinking F major, A flat major. So here's my F. Here's my A flat. The ideas that you could try is if you have a shape that works, try and transform it in real time between the two kind of worlds. And then another idea is to try and keep a phrase kind of happening none of this has to be particularly theory intensive. What I'm kind of keeping in mind in my head is how F major looks on the fretboard and those relative boxes, and how A flat major looks. I'm trying to keep it simple in my head, and so I'm just trying to keep lines continuing. And if I'm starting off in A flat, and then I'm thinking, right, what would the next available note be in F once I got to that point where it needs to change? You know, you'll hear when you make mistakes. And if you get bored with that as a concept, what you can then do is try kind of more complicated ideas. One of the things that I like to try and do is to take a structure like this. Okay, and imagine, so first of all you practice this idea in context, so you do it all the way through A flat major. And then also take that same idea and learn it in F major. What you're going to do is try and kind of move between those two worlds kind of simultaneously. I'll try and show you what I mean. You're going to start in A flat, move to F, then try and get back to A flat in this kind of way. And by doing this sort of thing, it's not necessarily hugely theory-based. We're kind of trusting our instinct and building this kind of theory, instinct, feel bridge. I think this is a really good way to try and practice some of this stuff. If you want the backing track and you want me to write some of these ideas out, kind of Patreon will be the place. I'll put together a little worksheet for a few of those ideas that I kind of showed you there. But I think this idea of there being a tension between theory and feel doesn't necessarily have to be true. I think you can kind of blend both, and I think Alan Hinds is a perfect example of a person who's done both. So maybe if you're feeling fruity, go check out that course on TrueFire, and as I say, the all access pass I think is probably pretty decent value. If you can find 3, 4, 5 courses that you find inspiration from, I think that's quite a good thing. Thank you for stopping by. If you wanted to like and subscribe, you could. Cheers for now.